Isn't that a lovely picture of the sparrow on the pew sheet? There you are. You hadn't looked at it, had you? Well, it's just too much for someone like me. I got to do something about sparrows in the address today. But in order to set the scene, let me play you something.
Fred, a little cockney sparrow, looking cold and pale, sleeping on a London roof, fell off in a gale. He flapped his wings with all his might, but didn't stand a chance. And long before his breakfast time, he found himself in France.
I'll tell you more about it later. Hear the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Matthew. A disciple is not above his teacher, nor a slave above the master. It's enough for the disciples to be like the teacher and the slave like the master. If they've called the master of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they malign those of his household? So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. What I say to you in the dark, tell in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground unperceived by your Father. And even the hairs of your head are all counted. So do not be afraid. You are of more value than many sparrows. Everyone, therefore, who acknowledges me before others, I will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before others, I also will deny before my Father in heaven. Do not think that I've come to bring peace to the earth. I've not come to bring peace, but a sword. I've come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. One's foes will be members of one's own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. You will have heard it said before. Doesn't that sound sort of religious and scriptural? You will have heard it said before, but this time by Father Stephen, that he gets all the difficult gospels to preach on, and I get all the easy ones. Well, I'm not sure that the boot isn't on the other foot today, because quite frankly, that's a pretty challenging reading. And it talks about all sorts of things that we don't really want to hear. I mean, it's not necessarily a great surprise when, son-in-law and mother-in-law don't have the highest opinion of each other. You don't want your family to be splitting up, do you? And there it all is, and lots of other things besides. I mean, for example, when he talks about Beelzebul, he's really talking about evil. And in our lives, we know that we sometimes come up against evil. Sometimes it's evil in itself. Sometimes it's an evil person. Not easy to deal with. And let's be honest, there are times when we come up against fear. And fear is a part of our lives. There are times when we have people around us who are not dealing in the whole truth. Sometimes the hardest things to deal with are half-truths. There's a little bit of truth, just enough to take people along, but not the whole truth upon which you could build something worthwhile like righteousness. And, well, I can say this because it's in the gospel. Life can be hell. And then what about, peace and the sword? I mean, we all really quite like it when things are nice and peaceful and predictable. But have you noticed that it's in the middle of the times when things are nice and peaceful and predictable that something comes along, often someone comes along, and pierces our hearts like a sword? And the families against one another. Oh, for anybody who's brought up children, we do know about that, don't we? And the families set against each other. And of course, because we love them so much, they become a source of woe to us. Whatever else it is, Jesus is being realistic. And he's telling us things as they really are. And then he says something quite extraordinary. He talks about 2 sparrows sold for a penny. Incidentally, you will find in the Psalms, rather charming psalm, which talks about the sparrow will find a nest. And can I just tell you, very much like supermarkets today, where it's buy one, get one free, if you go to Luke's Gospel, you can get 5 sparrows for 2 pennies. But there you are. Oh, aren't we up to date? Now, I said I'd tell you about the little bit that I played at the beginning. When our children were young, there was a very popular thing called Captain Beaky. Does anybody remember Captain Beaky? A few, not many. I thought Captain Beaky was brilliant. And Captain Beaky, not only, but there was even something called the Gospel according to Captain Beaky. But they produced all these wonderful songs. Absolutely beautiful, witty songs. Very beautiful music. Very beautifully performed. Some of them were quite sad. And the one that I brought with me today, because of the sparrows, is one sung by Petula Clark, and I found it on YouTube again. So if you want to look it up, it's Petula Clark Cockney Sparrow, right? Worth listening to. You heard the beginning bit. Fred, a Cockney sparrow, gets blown off the roof in a gale, and however hard he tries, he doesn't stand a chance, and he ends up in France. There he meets a lady sparrow. She is the most outrageous flirt. She really is. I mean, very clever, very subtle, but most outrageous. Let me illustrate that for you. She's already taken him round Paris and shown him all the beautiful things and sort of sung about how lovely it would be to have a lover who was kind and to be on the Tour Eiffel, looking at Paris at your feet, and all sorts of things. And then it gets to this bit. The bells you hear are Notre Dame. A wedding there is best. And there's a disused chimney pot to build a double nest. Wow. Well, Fred is quite willing to go along with this. And they finish by going to a cobbled street. And after taking bread and wine, the sparrows fall asleep. And then when Fred wakes up, he hears the bells, and he says, them's bells I know. Them's not the bells of Notre Dame. There's the bells of Bow. And he's been dreaming. But he finishes by saying, whatever happens, he will always remember that beautiful dream and a bird called Marguerite. Okay, how on earth are we going to get from there back into the gospel? Well, let's revisit the gospel. The first thing is that this is a gospel about realism. The world is a tough place. But if you think it's tough just by being a normal human being in this world, just try being a disciple. Because the moment you become a disciple, in lots of ways you become a threat. Because you stand outside the ways of the world and you try to remind people about things like love and righteousness and compassion and mercy. And not everybody wants to hear that. And you might very well find yourself on the receiving end of people who are trying to take you down. Rather like children trying to take each other down when they're at school and they're growing up and they're uncertain. And you feel somehow as though this is a very hard task. Well, Jesus says it's a hard task. Unless you take up your cross, you are not worthy of me. And it is a tough world, and Jesus warns us about it. But there's another side to that coin. And this is love. We're back to the sparrows. This is love. You have discovered the love of God. You have found that love, as expressed through Jesus Christ, has become the most wonderful part of your life. But here's the difference. The difference is that this isn't a dream. And so from that strength, from the love of God, you are never going to have to wake up. It is there to strengthen you. And that's why it says in the gospel, don't worry about it. All right, when I'm worried about something, my beloved wife is most likely to say to me, don't worry. If you're anything like me, immediately you say, you don't understand. You know, yes, I know you want to say don't worry, but Jesus is saying, don't worry. I will be with you. Not one of your feathers will be ruffled. Not one of the hairs of your head will be damaged. You are contained, protected, sponsored by, supported by a love beyond the wildest imaginations. And I just think that is fantastic. So, don't worry. And no buts.